So welcome everyone to our 2023 Nonprofit Trend Report. I would like to thank everyone who participated in providing insight into the preparation of this trend report. We're grateful. We'd also like to thank the Nonprofit Resource Hub and its members for their support in putting this year's report together. For those of you who are not aware of the Nonprofit Resource Hub, I encourage you to visit their website at nonprofitresourcehub.org and consider joining. Nonprofit Resource Hub serves the nonprofit sector as a bridge, connecting nonprofit organizations to sources and to each other with a goal of building stronger communities through public-private partnerships, through social entrepreneurism, ongoing targeted education, and what's more, the membership to the Nonprofit Resource Hub for nonprofit organizations is free. So it really is a good place for you to get resources and information and everything else. So I'd like to remind everybody that I do not have a crystal ball. So when we're looking at a trend report, there's a lot of forward-looking aspects of the presentation, which they are basically the opinion of me and my firm. So again, a lot of this stuff is stuff where we see things are going, but obviously we are not going to be perfect at this. I mean, to be honest, if you think about it, when we did our 2020 nonprofit trend, we did not predict the COVID pandemic. So there's a lot of things that are going to potentially happen here that we may miss. So again, we try to do the best we can. We try to provide the best information we can. I think the problem that you find is that especially in today's marketplace, you're sitting here and we're looking at one of the biggest factors that's facing everybody is the economy. And the problem is that trying to predict where the economy is going is like trying to predict the weather. You can look at patterns, you can check economic pressures, you can look at ways the financial winds are blowing. You can check the temperature of consumer confidence. You consider historical trends. But in the end, there's a whole lot of uncertainty and a bit of conjecture as to how 2023 will shake out. Unfortunately, there are still a tremendous level of kind of moving parts that are taking place. I mean, think about it. We have an economic downturn, recession that will bring with it additional increases in inflation, interest rates, demand for services, unemployment, and anticipated corresponding declines in the stock market and funding streams. We have a shortage of leadership. At all levels, board, C-suite, middle management, and that's kind of exacerbated by the lack of appropriate succession planning. I mean, one of the things we've seen out there in the marketplace is that there hasn't been a tremendous level of succession planning that has taken place to date. We've got increased competition for donations, which will require each one of you guys to be more strategic in your approach to fundraising and kind of open in your ongoing communication with your donors. So that's something that you're going to have to continue to, and we'll talk about that a lot more as we move on. There's increased threats from cybersecurity, government audits, compliance matters, new regulations, the list goes on. These will require nonprofits to do kind of a better assessment of internal and external risks and work with their boards and their management teams to kind of monitor all of this. Obviously, you need to hire and retain quality staff, which has been a big issue, especially when you're looking at direct service providers, and those lower level staff members. That's been tough. So you're going to have to rethink traditional staffing models and be more flexible with your work environments and find ways to increase pay, increase benefits, look for things that are going to attract people. I mean, people want to work at home because daycare has gotten so expensive. So, I mean, again, think about things like that in terms of benefits. Daycare is an important benefit that people are looking for. We haven't seen the budget come out yet for New York State. New York City's budget has been presented. New York State, we expect to get some semblance of where that's going within the next few days. But, there have been, or we're expecting to see declining government funding at the federal level, which could mean, some level of cutbacks at the state and local levels. So again, what's going to happen there, and that's going to be kind of open at this point because we don't really know where that's going to go at this, until the budget stuff comes out. So it's going to be really, really important for nonprofit organizations to kind of look for other revenue streams and find ways to diversify so that they can lessen the impact. There's lack of socialization, increased polarization, equity and inclusion issues, ongoing divisiveness, and isolationism, social unrest, anxiety, mental health issues. These are all things that we're grappling with, and that we're going to be continuing to grapple with, over the next year. As it said in the trend report, 2023 didn't just creep up on us. I mean, we knew 2023 was coming. We saw where things were going based on 2022. And I think, we're just seeing a lot more of that in 2023 as the economy is still down, and we've been in this prolonged economic downturn for a while. Nonprofits will continue to need to be strategic in 2023 in terms of their thinking, with greater emphasis on strategic thought process and planning, and being proactive as opposed to reactive. We have to forget about how we've operated in the past. It's a new day, which means new trends. So let's kind of look at what we have kind of in store and what we're kind of looking at here from a trends perspective. So again, I don't think we can kind of start off a trend discussion without kind of focusing on the economy first. I mean, I think this is the biggest issue that's kind of facing the sector in 2023. I mean, if you think about it, the COVID pandemic and its impact that it had on every facet of our lives, organizations, and sector. I mean, we had supply chain shortages that happened. We had constant operational disruptions. We had close downs and all that stuff. Federal government tried to make up for a lot of that. So they threw a lot of money out there to try to bolster the economy and trying to create or prevent a major decline in the economy. Unfortunately, what happened with all this money that kind of hit the streets, that money kind of pushed inflation up, and it really started, the whole aspect of where we are today. I mean, think about it. You had stimulus payments, you had enhanced level of unemployment funding, you had a tightening labor market, you have all of the CARES Act funding that hit the market and everything else. So all of those things really were the precursor of where we are today with respect to the economy. And again, where are we with respect to the economy? That's a good question, because there's different schools of thought. I mean, some people think we're already in a recessionary period. There's definitely been a downturn in the economy, but is it a recession? Is it not a recession? Not sure. Some people feel we're not going to hit a recession. Some people feel if we do, it's going to be a short time in the recession. I can tell you that, my feeling is that, 2023 is going to be kind of a tough year. I think things are going to turn around a little later than people are thinking it will. And I think we may not see some release from, where we are economically until sometime in 2024. If we look at what's kind of happening, I mean, January 2023 is already shaping up as a tough time for the labor markets. There's been an increased level of layoffs. Google laid off staff, Amazon laid off 1 to 2% of their staff. IBM had a 1.5% drop in their layoff in their workforce. Gemini knocked off 10% of their workforce. 3M let go almost 1% of their workforce. Microsoft had a big layoff at 4 to 5% of their workforce. DirecTV was 5 to 6%. Goldman Sachs was almost 8%. You've got all of these layoffs that are happening in 2023, which will help to start to I guess lessen the impact we're having in terms of that tight labor market. To put it in perspective, unemployment in New York State in December of 2022 was hovering somewhere around 3.5%, which was lower than the federal average. The federal average for unemployment was about 4.3%. And that 3.5% is kind of equivalent or just about at the 20-year low for unemployment. We are expecting to see some increase in unemployment. Again, that's already happening right now with the labor markets starting to loosen up a bit with all the layoffs that are happening. We are expecting unemployment to kind of jump up to somewhere between 4 and 5% in 2023. So there's going to be definitely more people out on the street, more access for nonprofit organizations to, potentially to bring on staff. Even so, even with some, loosening up of the markets, there are some pockets that I think we're going to continue to see issues with. I mean, it's anybody who runs a school is having a tough time finding educational staff. Healthcare workers are at a premium. You can't find them. Fiscal staff, it's been really tough on the fiscal side. I mean, there was an article that came out, I think it was in the New York Times about a month and a half ago, that said since 2020, 300,000 accountants have gotten out of the marketplace. So you're seeing that there are definitely going to be some areas that, even with the loosening of the labor market, are still going to be tight. We expect that, again, that labor market's going to continue to loosen. Like I said, there have been a bunch of layoffs already. I think, when we get out into the second quarter, that's when we're going to really start to see that kind of uptick in that unemployment levels. And when that kind of uptick starts to really happen, that's when we're going to start seeing some loosening of the economy. And that's when we should hopefully start to see some leveling out of inflation. A thing that's been kind of keeping that inflation up right now has been the tight labor market. There's a shortage of leadership. 50.3% of U.S. adults 55 and over are out of the workforce. So you got almost half of the individuals over 55 who are no longer working. That's up from 48.1% prior to the pandemic. So we are seeing that, we're going to continue to have some of that more experienced labor force leaving the labor market, which is going to take with it some of those leadership areas. Leaders are, there's been a whole bunch of, we've heard about all these issues with mental health issues and everything else. Leaders are 10% more burned out today than they were in 2020 when the COVID pandemic first hit. So, leadership has just been having a tough time. They're dealing with, things very different from what they're used to. They're dealing with remote workforce and dealing with having to manage staff from afar and everything else, which has definitely been a lot more difficult to do. There's studies that say that, workers don't necessarily want to come back, but managers, want their staff to come back. 75% of all managers are looking for their staff to come back. But less than a third of the staff actually want to come back to work. So you're always going to continue to have this hybrid sort of remote work environment. If you're not offering that, you're going to be losing your staff. So that's going to be something that's going to continue to stay for the long haul. Inflation is a big thing. The overall inflation rate for 2022 was approximately 6.5%. That was down from 7.1 in 2021. 2021 actually set a 40-year high for inflation at that 7% level. So we did come down in 2022. We're anticipating at the end of the day for 2023 that inflation levels will probably be somewhere between 3 and 4%. At least that's kind of what I'm reading. Unfortunately, the Federal Reserve, when they set their targets at 2 to 2.5%. So what that basically means is that it doesn't look like inflation is going to get low enough to where the Federal Reserve wanted inflation to be, which means that we could be seeing additional interest rate hikes over 2023. And we clearly don't expect to see interest rates to start to decline again until we kind of get that inflation managed. So let's talk about what that means. If we're looking at inflation of 3 to 4%, what does that mean in terms of salaries for staff? I'm going to kind of throw out a question out to the group if people want to kind of jump in and throw something into the chat. What are you guys expecting raises to be for 2023? You got, like I said, you got inflation at about 3 or 4%. What are you anticipating your raises that you're going to be having to give out this year to staff? If people can kind of just throw that into the chat so we can kind of see, what direction we think raises are looking. What I'm thinking is that if you're going to hit 3 to 4% inflation and you need to kind of cover people for cost of living net of taxes, you're probably looking at raises of about 5 or 6%. But let's see what people think. If people want to, again, throw that into the chat, that would be awesome. I'm not seeing anything, so I guess people don't want to share. From an economy perspective, continuing, so rising interest rates, as I said, expect that we're looking at probably 1 or 2 more interest rate bumps during early 2023. Sally, thanks for sharing. So you're looking at kind of flat with maybe admin 5% staff. So yeah, I mean, again, I think that's kind of what we're expecting is somewhere in that, like I said, 5 or 6% range is what we're kind of thinking that we're going to be looking at for the upcoming year. But again, I think we're looking at, continuing to see some level of rising interest rates. I think we're going to probably cap out in terms of interest rates right now. They're somewhere around 4.5%, I think is the current Fed rate. I think we're going to see the Fed rate cap out somewhere a little over 5% for the year. So do expect there to be a little bit of a increase in interest rates that's happening out there. The New York State budget, I mean, the governor's supposed to be releasing the recommendations tomorrow, the next day, sometime soon. We've been hearing some big numbers kicking around for the nonprofit sector in terms of additional dollars that will be coming out there. I don't know that the trends are going to be as big as what we're hearing. I've heard some, I know that like some of the industries are looking for 11% increases. I heard some talk about some areas with 15% increases to try to, combat the inflation we've had for the last couple of years. I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing the numbers are going to be that big. I think, if those are the numbers people are expecting, I think you're in for a rude awakening. I think the numbers are going to be a lot lower than that. We're in a situation where the government has to make up for certain level of budget gaps. They do have some federal monies left over that will help them to close some of those gaps over the next 2 years. But right now, there's a prediction that the state is going to have a $6.2 billion gap in 2027. So there is going to need to be some cutbacks and some balancing and reserves established within the state level so that we don't run into a big problem when we get into the future years. Anticipate stock market declines. I mean, I think there's going to be continued stock market declines happening through 2023, or at least through the first part of 2023. If you think about it from a interest rate perspective, the money supply is tightening up a little bit. And with the money supply tightening up, in order for banks and stuff to attract money, they have to increase the interest rates that are given. We're seeing a big disparity, and something that you guys should be looking at. There's a big disparity in terms of the interest rates being offered. There's a lot of banks that are still offering less than 1%, but there are interest rates to be had out there at 3 to 4%. So something you should be looking at, if you're not getting a lot on your savings, you should be looking to see if there are better interest rates out there, because again, there's big disparity in what we're seeing out there in terms of interest rates. But as interest rates continue to creep up a little bit, that interest rate, when we see that interest rate creeping, you're going to see more dollars come out of the market and go towards those fixed rates of return of 3 to 4%. From interest, and that's going to help to drive the stock market down. Part of the problem that we have with the stock market going down, you're in a situation where, if you think about it, 23% of all of New York City's personal income tax revenue comes from Wall Street, and from the New York State perspective, it's somewhere around 7%. So you've got a big chunk of money coming from Wall Street, and if the stock market continues to go down, that's going to mean less money for the state and city budgets. So overall, what are we seeing as the impact on the nonprofit sector with respect to the economy? You got health and welfare-based organizations. I mean, with unemployment expected to be on the rise, there's going to be a bigger need for services within the health and welfare type organizations. So kind of expect that you're going to be in a situation where there's going to be a need for increased services. We're seeing a larger gap between the haves and the have-nots. those people who, have resources, the gap is getting bigger between those who don't. So there's a lot more people who are living paycheck to paycheck. So, with that increase in unemployment, I think you're going to be in a situation where there's going to be an increase in demand for service for the health and welfare type organizations. When we look on the other side, if you look at educational organizations that rely upon, private schools and stuff that rely upon tuition from parents, and if you look at arts and cultural organizations, which drive their money through attendance, I think, again, with less discretionary money available, I think you can see a drop in both of those. So you're going to see kind of an increase in health and welfare demand, but potentially a decrease in some of the demand in the arts and cultural organizations and schools. As I said, you're going to see a continued downturn in the market, which will negatively impact fundraising. Unfortunately, fundraising is kind of the lifeblood for many organizations. So, hopefully, with the market going down, hopefully we'll see it turn around a little bit by the end of the year. I mean, I think 2024 will be a better year than 2023. Unfortunately, I think 2023 is really going to be kind of the culmination of all of the stuff we've seen during 2022, and it's going to reach a certain level of acuity here. Expect more cautious government spending, which I mentioned before, which means that, when we're budgeting, we have to just be very careful about how we're budgeting. And we have to make sure that when we're budgeting, we're actually looking at things in terms of, if the dollars don't come through the way we anticipated those dollars to come through, we need to make sure that we can react effectively and quickly. As I said, we could see a loosening of the labor market. Maybe not where we need it, but there could be a loosening of the labor market. One of the things you have to kind of consider and remember that when the labor market does kind of loosen, you could be in a situation where you'll be able to hire people now, but once that labor market starts to tighten again, you could see people leave. So you do have to figure out ways to, once you get them on board, to kind of keep them. We already talked about needing to properly budget for rising costs. I think that's going to be something that's going to be important. And I think, COVID will continue to be a disruptive factor. I mean, I think we've learned how to live with COVID. And I think, COVID is not what it was, obviously, back in 2020. But I think it's still going to impact organizations. You're still going to need to plan, for and make accommodations for staff, who are out because of COVID. I think people are still not 100% comfortable attending fundraising events in person. So I think you're still going to see some lingering impact of COVID and health-related issues that come into play. So what are some of the things that organizations kind of need here? Well, obviously, we still need to make sure that we have strong leadership. We're in a situation, as we kind of mentioned, people don't want to work in person. People want to work remote. I know that many organizations and many businesses are requesting employees to come back, and to work in person. I think that, there's still going to need to be some level of hybrid. And actually, I'm going to throw this out as a question. Are you guys requesting your staff to come back, or are you requesting them to come back on a 5-day-a-week basis? Are you requesting hybrid? I know some of you, with the type of businesses or type of organizations you have, your staff never actually left, and your staff were always performing services on an in-person basis. But with those staff that had the opportunity to work remotely, are you allowing them to continue to work remotely? Are you asking them to come back and forcing them to be back in the office? Are you creating a hybrid where they're working a few days a week? So I think it's good to, like I said, if we can kind of keep the chat going so that, people can kind of get a feel for what other organizations are doing. Because again, I think we learn from each other, and I think that's the important part of things. So it looks like a lot of you are looking to try to bring people back. So some of you are doing, 5 days, some of you are doing hybrid. So again, I think that, again, a lot of you are some of you, look, there is a few of you that are still doing totally remote. So, so anyway, again, strong leadership is important. There's a shortage of leadership as people continue to leave the marketplace. And I think there's more of a shortage again here in New York, because you've seen a lot of people leave the New York marketplace. That's why unemployment in New York is lower than unemployment nationwide. You're also looking at, some of the skill sets that leadership needs to have. I mean, obviously they need to be flexible. They need to be empathetic. I think empathy is going to be something that's going to continue to be important. Remember, as I said, there's a higher level of anxiety. There's a higher level of burnout. I mean, one of the issues that, management is facing is, as I said, before, there's a higher level of burnout at the management level, but most managers don't really know how to cope with burnout at the staff level. So that's something that, again, if we can kind of build that into our leadership training, in terms of how to deal with some of the mental stress and stuff that their staff are dealing with, that would be great. And diversity is going to continue to be an issue, especially in the nonprofit sector. When we look at our boards and our leadership, they really have to be representative of the communities that we serve. That's important because that's going to help us to better understand, better reach, and provide effective service to the communities that we work with. So again, I think, with leadership being such an important issue for the sector, again, and I know we talked about this last year, but organizations are going to need to invest more money in leadership training. And that's something that's extremely important. I mean, we talked about the fact that people are leaving, that a lot of organizations don't have effective succession plans in place. And I think, the part of the answer is going to have to be, training your leadership and getting your leadership up to a level where your leadership can effectively operate. Risk management is another big issue that we're seeing and that organizations need to grapple with. If you think about it, we've got things like contract management, we've got Medicaid compliance, we've got increase in audit activities. I know the OMIG has started to do audits of early intervention providers. You've got cybersecurity, which we'll talk about more later. We've got insurance, we've got governance issues. You've got all of these issues from a risk perspective, both internal and external, that are somewhat being exacerbated by the economic downturn. To what extent are organizations out there kind of considering these things? So how are they being discussed at audit committee and compliance committees? Do organizations even have compliance committees in place to ensure that these things are functioning effectively? So risk management is going to be an important consideration as we move forward through 2023. Organizations need to have a clear understanding organizational wide in terms of what the risks are. And then, as I mentioned before, careful budgeting and cash flow monitoring. I mean, we've got inflation, we got interest rates, we've got, health insurance is up tremendously. Health insurance, we're seeing, some of our clients are reporting back health insurance increases of more than, 20%. So this is really going to be important in terms of, careful budgeting and making sure that we understand, what we're looking at here. As I said before, expect some level of decreases in fundraising. So, what's going on with our revenue streams? If we're seeing drops in fundraising, if we're potentially seeing declines in government contracts and stuff, where's the money going to come from? I was, and I mentioned before when we were talking about some of the risks, one of those things, contract management or contract monitoring. I was talking to an agency yesterday, and we were kind of going over some stuff, and they had underspent a couple of their contracts, and part of it was because they really didn't do an effective job of monitoring what was going on. So again, I think it's going to be much more important. The resources are going to be somewhat limited. And if we've got resources, we need to make sure that we take advantage of those resources that we have. Let me, again, throw out another question, because, again, I kind of like the way, there's been a lot of good communication back and forth. Thanks, Judy. Thanks, Jen, and everybody for getting involved. But what are you guys planning on doing differently during 2023, given the economic conditions? What are you looking to do in terms of funding streams? What are you looking to do in terms of staffing? What are you looking to do in terms of programming or anything else? So if people can kind of throw in there, what are you looking at in terms of changes in 2023 that are going to be brought about due to the economic downturn? That would be great. Information flow, I think, is going to be critical going forward. We're in a situation where there's so much access to really good information out there. And we'll talk a little bit more about artificial intelligence, AI, and the ability to pull in much more effective information. It's going to be really, really important from an information flow to make sure that we can effectively identify and establish the appropriate metrics that we need in order to really provide timely information to everybody and to people within the organization. That, how are we doing programmatically? What are our leading indicators, telling us? Are we getting the volume that we need? Are we seeing increased demand for services, which may be stretching our supply chains a little thinner? What can we do in terms of, food in that respect? So there's a lot of this stuff that's kind of happening here, and it's going to be really, really important to have that good, timely information. If you think about it right now, information is really the lifeblood of a lot of organizations. And if you don't have good information, it's going to be really, really difficult for you to effectively pivot, in these difficult times. And we've talked about it before, but I'm going to bring it up again. Proper planning and strategic thinking. We can't turn back. We can't go back to the way things were pre-pandemic. We don't want to go back to the way things were pre-pandemic. We're in a new world. We need to embrace the future. All right. So we can't be sitting in a situation where we're kind of just focused on where we were and kind of try to get back to there. I think we're going to be looking at a greater level of collaborations and partnerships. We need to be working better as a sector. And that means that, people are going to need to, or organizations are going to need to continue to come together. I think we need to rethink our operations and rethink our relevancy. Things have changed. This isn't, the same organization we were 5 years ago. Are we really delivering service the way we should be delivering service? Are we, meeting the needs of the individuals we serve? So we need to reassess the current programs and contracts that we have in place. Are the contracts effective? Are we losing money on them? And if we are they core parts of our mission, and should we be doing them? We need to reassess our service delivery models. Should we be getting out there into the community, a deeper community involvement? Should we be more centralized? How should we be delivering services? If we're not there where the people need us, are we really effective? Should we be looking at, delivering services in a more nimble, mobile way than we have it before? Should we be looking, as I said before, for greater collaboration and teaming and partnering so that we can really provide a community-based solution to the needs of the people we serve? Reassess the impact of our current services. Consider agency effectiveness. Should we, again, as I said, should we rethinking what we do and how we do it? advocacy and monitoring is going to continue to be important. We need to make sure that our voice is being heard. Again, as I said, there are decisions being made up at the government level, and with those decisions that are being made at the government level, I'm sorry, but I find too many times decisions are made in a vacuum without bringing the stakeholders into that decision-making process. We need to reach out to our umbrella organizations. I know Jan Fisher's on this from Nonprofit Westchester, but we need to reach out to our umbrella organizations. We need to let them know what the issues we're facing are. We need to let them or help them in their advocacy efforts with government in order to be able to really let the government know where we are as an organization or as an industry. I think too often what's happening is our voice is not being heard, our message is not getting out there. And I think it's really, really important, especially in today's environment, especially now when we're close to when the state budget is going to get released, to make sure that they understand that that the state understands that the dollars coming from the state are super important. DEI, again, is also and will continue to be a significant issue. DEIA, we need to make sure that we are accessible at all levels. Our websites are accessible, that we're providing appropriate tools so that everybody can access what's on our websites. We need to incorporate more video into the things that we're doing. We need to bring DEIA to the forefront of our thought process. Like I said, our organizations provide so much great service to people in need, but we're only going to be able to continue to provide effective service and increase the effectiveness of our service is if we really understand the people we serve, if we're listening and incorporating into our teams, our management, our boards, people who think like, have the same backgrounds and cultures, speak the same languages as the people that we serve. All right, I think that's enough about the economy. Let's go on to other things. I mean, one of the big things we're seeing, or big other areas, is fundraising. And one of the things we're seeing from a fundraising perspective is that, people are not giving the way they used to give before. People are not opening up checkbooks and writing out checks. I mean, you do have a certain portion of the population. You have, maybe some of the baby boomers and the generation before the baby boomers that are, but for the most part, people are looking for easier ways to give money. The whole aspect of trusted payment apps, digital wallets, things like Venmo, PayPal, Apple Pay, Google Pay, those are really important. Donations are up 1.5 times more when a nonprofit offers digital wallet payment options. 26% of iPhone owners that gave with Apple Pay. So you actually have to make sure that you have the ability to accept donations the way that organizations, the way that donors want to give. Another big thing is focusing on retaining donors. New donor retention rate is less than 23%. So what that basically means is if I'm a first-time donor, there's going to be a 77% likelihood that I'm not going to be giving a donation a second time to organization. So that's kind of really important. I know Nancy threw out a comment about some of these digital wallets and digital payments do cut into the donations because they offer fees. That's the case with some of the credit cards. Some of the other payment methods don't have as big a fee. One of the things we're seeing is, when you ask donors to give, and if they want to use it, you can ask them if they'll pay the fee. Just include it in the ask. So when you make your ask, you say, a $50 donation. You can make a $50 donation, or you can make a donation of $51.50, which includes the fees that we have to pay. I think a lot of donors will be willing to pay the fees. So again, what I started to say is, focus on retaining donors. That's going to be important. If you can get donors to kind of step up a little bit, and you're dealing with things like monthly donations. If you get someone to go on a monthly donation, you've got an 80% retention rate year over year. So another question I'd like to throw out there to the group, if you guys don't mind providing an answer to this. What are you guys doing to try to entice first-time donors to donate in future years, or donate a second time? What are you guys trying to do? And in terms of some of the questions that are being thrown out there in terms of the digital wallets, yeah, I think we're seeing organizations offering multiple options, not just one. One of the things that we're stressing out there is for organizations to try to e-commerceify, if that's even a word, their websites. I mean, think about it. When you go out there and you go and you shop, you pull things into your shopping cart and you walk away from your shopping cart, you get a reminder that something's left out there in your shopping cart. Well, part of what you can do is you can go out there and do the same thing. If a donor's been at your website considering making a donation, remind them that the importance, and send out a quick email or send out some sort of reminder that what the impact the donation that they could have made would have had. If someone's giving money on your website, or giving money through one of your asks, at the end of the ask, when someone goes to make a donation, before it clears to the payment, ask them if they'd like to uptick their donation to a monthly donation, and talk about the impact that a monthly donation could have. So again, try to find ways that you can upsell, offer alternatives to donors and things like that. Try to also find ways to, I guess, better understand your donors, better get to know your donors, so that if you can better understand and better get to know your donors, you can better target your donors. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about AI as we go through this, but there's a lot of tools out there that when a donor makes a contribution, you can actually start to track what attracted that donor, what was the ad or the ask that motivated that donor to give, so that you can create more asks that are similar to that. Also, as part of the donation, ask some questions. Don't be afraid to ask donors about, how they heard about your organization. What about your organization were they attracted to? How do they has somebody that they care about been touched or impacted by your organization? Ask a bunch of questions. Get to gather information about your donors so that you can make your asks more targeted in the future. The more your ask is targeted, the more likely your donation is going to yield a higher level of donations. Peer-to-peer fundraising is an important component of things. Consider incorporating more peer-to-peer fundraising into your campaigns. Peer-to-peer fundraising is where an individual reaches out to people they know, and you're able to tap into their network. So, I go and I ask people I know who may not be associated with the organization. But again, that's something that is important. So peer-to-peer fundraising raises an average of 3.8 times more than other sorts of time-based campaigns. So again, if you can incorporate some aspect of peer-to-peer fundraising into your fundraising campaigns, that's going to go a long way and kind of help in that process. More and more people are giving via mobile devices today than ever before. 47.5% of donors gave through their mobile devices in 2022. So again, when you're sitting out here and you're looking at how you're going to reach out to your donors, you have to consider that there are other mediums. It's not just the traditional ways that you've been doing in the past. consider text messages, consider, reaching out to them through, like I said, mobile devices, because that's where donors are giving, and it's just going to get more and more as we move on. Text messages have an open rate of 95%. Emails only have an open rate of 18%. So if you can send text messages out to donors, there's a much higher likelihood that donors are going to open up those text messages. If you are working with text messages, you want to keep them short and simple. It should be a kind of a quick ask. I think where a lot of people also miss is if you're going to be sending out a text message, where you're going to be shooting out information or shooting out some level of statistics or giving people an update as to what's happening with something you're working on, there should always be a kind of an ask that goes at the end of it, because you want to make it easy for people to donate. You want to have a button so that they can just click on it and make a quick donation. You want to provide a clear call for action and provide relevant links. So either you provide them the ability to donate directly through the mobile device, or a way to get back to your website quickly to make that donation. Influencers are another trend that we're seeing out there in the marketplace. We're seeing kind of an uptick in influencers getting kind of involved in the donation process. A couple things to keep in mind. There's something called Gaming for Good. It's where gamers raise money through playing video games. One of the big avenues for that is Twitch, which is owned by Amazon. But most people, when they're thinking about social media, are not necessarily thinking about Twitch. But again, through this Gaming for Good, players will, videotape themselves playing and broadcast it live, and other people watch it. More people watch gaming than watch any other sport. And if you can get gamers to support your charities, the gamers will, over a period of time, raise money for charities. And as they're doing it, they're kind of engaging the rest of the gaming community to kind of get involved. So again, something to kind of think about in terms of other ways that you can kind of increase your footprint, increase your awareness out there is again, through some of these influencers. And again, when you're working with influencers, you want to try to find influencers that are aligned with your charity, so that it's kind of a natural process. There's an article I gave you within this PowerPoint. I provided a link to an article that CauseVox put out that really looks at social media influencers. And I think it was a really good article. So something I think that could be good for everybody. You want to try to personalize your campaign. So when you're out there and you're trying to reach out to donors, you want to try to make sure that that campaign is a personalized campaign. You want to get to know your donors. You want to have a conversation. You want to make it personal. Reach out, talk to them. Make the donors feel important. Because if you send out target emails to donors about a topic or something that's important to them that they're interested in, you have a 20% increase in the donor opening up the email, reading it, and potentially responding. So any advantage you can get is going to be important. If you understand what the donor is looking for and you communicate that, again, you have a much larger opportunity to solicit a contribution. Again, you want to make the donor feel important, valued, and you want to make it personal. Donors want to know the impact that their funds are having. So if they're giving you money, they want to know how that money is being used. They want to know the impact it's having. And if to the extent that you can do it, you want to try to make it tangible. The more you can make something tangible and the more you can connect their donation to what you're doing from an impact perspective, the better off you're going to be in terms of attracting dollars. So I think everybody knows that, or most of you should know that Cerini and Associates, my firm, is heavily involved with an organization called Book Fairies, who put books in the hands of adults and children who don't have access to age-appropriate books. One of the things that kind of makes it easy for us is the fact that it's easy or very tangible to say, if I put a book in the hands of a child, that's going to have an impact. So we have partnered with Book Fairies that for every billable hour we have as a firm, we put a book in the hands of a child through Book Fairies. So, the more that you can make things tangible, the more that you can show the direct impact and make it, easy for a donor to see. It's much easier to understand, here's money to put a book in the hands of a child than it is to say, give me money, I'm going to use it for counseling services or something like that, which is maybe a little bit more, broader. The more you can kind of boil it down to direct impact, the more you can boil it down to a one-on-one or impacting a individual, the better off you're going to be. And then again, as I mentioned before, you've got a lot of instances where, you have one-time donors and you got to try to turn things around. The more personal you can get in the messaging, the more personal you can get, the more impact you can show, the greater the likelihood you're going to have a donor giving a second time. You also need to keep in touch with donors throughout the year. And I think that's, again, another place where nonprofits do not do an effective job. They may send out that initial thank you, and it may be handwritten or it may be, computer generated or whatever. But then you need to continue to drip on them in a effective way, not drip on them saying all the time, give me more money, give me more money. But hey, look, this is what's happening in the organization. This is how your dollars have helped us. This is the impact those dollars are having. Here's insight into somebody you helped and how you helped them. The more you're able to make it personal for people, the more they're going to be willing to come back. And again, the goal is to try to get people to give on a monthly basis if possible. All right, so moving on. So some of the stuff that I think we're going to be seeing as we kind of move forward, there's going to be a tremendous level of wealth transference that happens over the next, 30, 40 years. I mean, you've got, a lot of, if you kind of think about the different kind of segments of the population, oops, throw it here. You got your Gen Z, you got your millennials, you got your Gen X, you got your baby boomers, and then you have, I guess, what they're referring to as matures, which are, older. So if you kind of think about this in terms of ages, your Gen Z are people who were born after 1995. Your millennials are born between 81 and 95. Your Gen X is 1965 to 1980. Your baby boomers are 1946 to 1964, and your matures are prior to 1946. So you've got this tremendous level of wealth where your matures and your baby boomers are going to be passing down a significant amount of wealth to your Gen Zs and millennials. So you're going to be in a situation where you've got to start thinking about generational donors and generational donations. You got to start thinking about how do I not just get involved with the person who's been giving, but how can I get a deeper relationship with the families of of my significant donors, because there are different thought processes in different ages. Just because a patriarch or matriarch of a family might be giving heavily to your organization, it doesn't mean that the next generation is going to want to give to your organization in the same way. So I think that's going to be something that's kind of extremely important in terms of looking at some of this stuff. And this all comes down to things like planned giving, and how do we communicate, some of that planned giving discussion, bequests, and how donors can make bequests, whether it be through, and I'm sorry, the planned giving could be also done through donor advised funds, or it could be done through, organizations setting up private foundations so that there's money earmarked for charities and stuff like that. So there's kind of a lot of this that kind of needs to take place, and we need to start having those generational discussions. So I think we're going to start seeing a higher level of legacy planning. I can tell you, it's funny. I just got, I had a financial planner reach out to me yesterday, and he mentioned that he has a lot of high net worth older individuals who are looking to align themselves and get a better understanding of what they can do from a planned giving perspective, and better align themselves with some charities and stuff. So we are starting to see, and so one of the ways that organizations can do is start reaching out to financial planners. Talk to financial planners, talk to estate planners. Find out how they can kind of get themselves entrenched with some of the people who are talking and starting to do the planning for these elderly folks. Again, I think it's important to cultivate that next generation of donors. One of the things that we're seeing out there is in 2021, overall in 2021, because 2022 data is not available yet, giving was up in 2021. There were more donations made to nonprofit organizations out there. One of the things, though, that's a little disturbing about that is the number of people who donated is down. So even though the dollars are up, the number of people who are giving are down. Only 50% of Americans donated in 2021, where, when we were looking at, 2021, 2001, 2002, 2003, there were about 2/3 of all donors gave. And again, this is going back to that have not discrepancy that exists, and the fact that there are, less people giving, but more dollars being given. So I think, I think it comes down to, we have to continue to kind of increase our connectivity to our donors. We have to build more, where possible, authentic relationships. So this is going to continue to be a kind of a trend out there. So if we kind of look at the generational statistics, kind of giving you a little insight into this. So if we look at the sizes of the populations, your Gen Z represents 82 million people in the US, or will represent 82 million people in the US by 2026. 57.3 of them research an organization before they donate to them. So you're seeing it's a lot more thought process. So, the stuff that you have on your website, the information you're pushing out there is going to be extremely important. 40.7% of them want some sort of monthly update on their impact. So they want to know, they want that communication. And if they're not getting that communication, they're not going to be back. They're moved by organization's mission, they're turned off by poor social media, and they prefer to donate digitally. They're most likely to donate to environmental and wildlife conservation, arts, cultural and humanities, youth development, and social causes. Millennials, as I said before, that's 1981 to 1995. There are 72.19 million people, 84% of them donated to charities in 2021. The average size donation for a millennial was about $481. So some key donation facts. Most inspired by people impacted by the organization, most likely to give via text message or app. So again, that text to donate type stuff is very, very important. Number one reason for no longer donating is feeling that the donation didn't matter. So again, it's showing them and connecting them to the fact that their donation had an impact. They're most likely to donate to children, health, local places of worship, human rights, and international affairs. And as I said before, you're going to see a tremendous level of wealth transference over the next 30 years. And that wealth transference is going to be going down to these two levels, the Gen Z and the millennials. So it's really going to be important for you to understand and start to connect with those generational areas. The next is Gen X, which again, 1965 to 1980. 65.8 million people, 64% volunteer at local nonprofits, 20% of all the philanthropic dollars are coming from Gen X. The average donation from a Gen X is about $732. They're big on crowdfunding, peer-to-peer fundraising. So this goes back to what we talked about, that peer-to-peer. The email is the best way to reach a Gen Xer. They like to donate by e-checks online. You know, that's the what do you call it? The e-wallets that are out there. They most likely to donate to local social and human services, animals, children, and local places of worship. Then we get to our baby boomers, again, 1946 to 64. There are 70.23 million people. 72% of baby boomers donate on an annual basis. And their average donation that from baby boomers is about $1,212 a year. Baby boomers represent 51 million donors in the US. They direct mail appeals, are the most successful with this group. Again, they're not as computer savvy, not as tech, so they're going to react better to direct mail campaigns. Most likely to donate to local social service nonprofits, animals, children, human rights, international affairs, and local places of worship. And then, as I said before, the other group that you have out there is the matures, which were born before 1946. There's about 27 million donors in that group. The average donation there is about $1,367 on an annual basis. They tend to be very loyal to the charities that they give to. And they give to organizations that have strong reputations and name recognition, and those that have impacted them or someone they care about. So I bring all that up because that kind of leads to the next kind of topic, which is social media. You know, and there are different social media outlets. You've got Facebook, you've got Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, and obviously there's more than that. We talked about Twitch before. But again, just some things, you know, to talk about. So from a social media perspective, when you think about it, social media is great for building awareness and relationships. You can get a large level of leverage by getting people that are to get people to repost some of the posts that you're making. So if I know, you know, 500 people and I repost something, that reposting is getting to 500 people that your original post maybe didn't get to. It allows you to really kind of easily share your impact through social media. Type of things that you should be posting on social media, things like how to fulfill your, how you're fulfilling your mission, the difference you're making, news and updates, the ability to make donors feel supported, or feel the donors, that are supporting you feel valued and appreciated. You can use it to promote events. You can introduce your team and programs. You can give people a glimpse behind the scenes. You can add videos. There's a lot of different things that you can kind of do with the different types of social media. About 16% of all donors have said that social media has influenced how they donate. So again, that's kind of a big number when you kind of consider it. So when you're kind of looking at the different social media outlets, you really want to try to figure out what is it you're trying to accomplish, who you're trying to reach. So again, if you look at this, you know, Facebook, about 3 billion users. It's the most significant social media platform out there because it does appeal to all ages. I mean, you've got pretty much every single generation in some way, shape, or form uses Facebook. You're seeing Gen Z is kind of bailing from Facebook, so we're losing Gen Z users on a regular basis. But all of the other age categories are out there using it. Facebook is probably the biggest for baby boomers, Gen X, and millennials is where we're seeing the biggest use of Facebook. Instagram appeals to a much younger crowd. 62% of all users are between the ages of 18 and 34, which puts us in the Gen Z millennial group. One of the interesting things about Instagram is one of the few social media outlets where you have just about as many female users as you have males. And when you think about it, females are historically more philanthropic. 60.7% of all donations come from females. So you are in a situation where Instagram, again, has a better split in terms of male, female. Twitter, very limited in your ability to reach out. You only have 280 characters to work with. We don't know what Twitter is going to look like going forward with, Elon Musk now owning it. We'll have to see. Twitter's big among millennials, is the biggest users of Twitter. LinkedIn, really geared more towards business professionals. It's a good tool if you're, again, trying to push out information, getting people to resend information and forward it. I think LinkedIn is also really, really good in terms of looking for ways to generate partnerships with businesses. So I think that's something that's really important. TikTok, big for under 20, so it's about 25%. That's your Gen Z population. It allows you to kind of add videos to what you're doing. And again, video content in most of these things is really important. Like Facebook and Instagram, the search engines actually favor videos. Speaking of videos, 10% of all millennials prefer to watch videos, which I think is important. I think when you consider it, adding videos to your social media strategy can generate a 1,200% increase in sharing. So the more you can kind of incorporate videos into your social media strategy, I think the better off you're going to be. Adding videos to email blasts can increase click rate by 200%. So, if you're not already doing things with video and adding video to, your marketing and fundraising campaigns, I think it's something that you should be. There's a lot of really cool stuff you can do with video. It gives you kind of a quick ability to tell your story. You have the ability to show people what you're doing and the good work you're doing. Easy way to say thank you. I guess, there's an old adage, a picture's worth 1,000 words. If a picture's worth 1,000 words, imagine what a video is worth, right? So that's important. So again, some things to keep in mind: you want to keep it short, and you want to make sure at the end of the video that there's some sort of call to action, a link for either advocacy or donations or whatever. AI, artificial intelligence, is playing a much bigger part today in fundraising than in the past, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later. But we're seeing increased automated communication with funders. You can gather a lot of information about your funders through AI to be able to better target your fundraising campaigns moving forward. You can set things where you can send out targeted messages. So if you know who's giving on a donation, you can personalize messages, you can personalize content that you give out to a donor based upon what donation platform they came through or what triggered their donation. There's been a lot of use of various AI tools like Jasper AI to develop collateral materials. You can actually get AI to write some really strong articles for you. Within the trend report, we do have one of the articles that's in the trend report was actually written partially using Jasper. So it's really a good tool to be able to develop good collateral material. Social responsibility continues to be important. 2/3 of all large American corporations believe that using philanthropy to advance business goals is a priority. You're looking within social responsibility, you're looking to find ways that you can develop strategies that are mutually beneficial to both the nonprofit and the for-profit business you're partnering with. You want to find organizations that are aligned in their values. You want to make sure that there's good open communications. Think about the benefits and the messaging that you can deliver out to your business partners. It gives them an advantage from a marketing and advertising perspective. I mentioned book fairs before. Think about the messaging that I can say that, for every billable hour I have, we put a book in the hands of a child. That's powerful messaging when I'm reaching out to potential clients and saying, look, over the course of the year, we're going to generate 300 hours worth of time. That means through your partnership with us, you're going to put 300 books in the hands of children. Think about the impact that you're having on education and literacy. So you got that. You also have, from an employee-employer relationship, employees want to work for organizations or companies that are socially responsible. So it gives you a good opportunity, or gives businesses a good opportunity through a partnership to show that they are strong community-minded organizations or companies. A couple of the little facts down here at the bottom I just threw in. Average donor, average age, I'd say, of donors is 65. So the average age of a donor is 65, and the average donor contributes about $813 on an annual basis. From a fundraising event, and people were giving some ideas in terms of what they're doing to keep their donors connected. But from a fundraising event, we're seeing that in-person attendance at events was down in 2022. We actually expected it to be up more than it did in 2022. There might be some additional increases in 2023, but I don't think we're going to get back to the pre-pandemic levels, which basically means that on a go-forward basis, we have to continue to think in terms of hybrid and online as part of the offerings that we're given. We talked about maybe the need for more smaller, more intimate events, such as board members hosting events, where you could have a board member maybe host an event in his or her home and include major and mid-range donors. Maybe invite if you're going to have a groundbreaking, or if you're going to have if you're doing research or something like that, give them like a behind the scenes look at things before information is published, so that the donors actually get information before it gets out there into the world. Maybe piggyback a fundraising event with a special donor reception, where it's kind of a little bit more of an intimate sort of event for your higher or mid-range donors. Again, just a way of keeping your donors connected to your organization. We're also seeing, and I guess the question is, when is the metaverse going to be a key component in fundraising? We're seeing some additional activity on the metaverse with respect to nonprofit organizations. Some things to look at. Gather is kind of a tool that's gathering innovative ways for people to connect within the metaverse. You have the social good community, which is an area within the metaverse on the Avicon grid that is free for nonprofits. They give you some real estate there and some rudimentary tools to kind of build on that real estate. TouchCast runs and hosts events on the metaverse. So we are seeing some increase in the use of the metaverse for people to connect. It does give nonprofits a tremendous opportunity to showcase who they are and what they do. It is going to require some level of investment, similar to when you kind of first developed a website. There's going to be some need to build out an area on the metaverse. But again, these are things to kind of think about. I don't know that 2023 is going to be the year of the metaverse, but I think we're going to start seeing some of that happen within the next 3 to 5 years. From a technology perspective, I think digital maturity is going to be a very, very important aspect. Prior to the COVID pandemic, I think technologically, nonprofit organizations were well behind the curve. And I think during the COVID pandemic, where organizations were required to pivot, I think they've caught up a bit. But I think you're still seeing that nonprofits are still not there yet in terms of digital maturity. According to a survey by Salesforce, only about 12% of nonprofits are where they need to be from a technological perspective. And one of the things that is important is that nonprofits who do have a mature technology environment are more likely to exceed their goals and have stronger relationships with their stakeholders. What we're looking at here is, from a technology perspective, the whole aspect of greater automation. We're talking about different software applications speaking to each other, the ability to utilize a higher level of AI to gather information so that you have real-time information within your organization to be able to make more effective decisions. those to kind of develop metrics that are going to be key metrics that allow you to again really understand how your organization is operating. I think right now, organizations have brought technology in and are using more technology than they have in the past. But I don't know that that technology has completely become integrated into their operations, into their businesses, into how they deliver service, into how they communicate with the outside world, into again, how they gather information and measure and capture impact. All of those things are things that I think are going to be important as we move forward. We talked a little bit about artificial intelligence before. I'm going to bring it up here again because it is an important trend in technology. Artificial intelligence can be used to automate workflows, provide technological insights. I mean, there's AI bots that go out there and gather information. You've got Fundwriter AI, which is useful in customizing fundraising appeals. You've got Jasper, which I mentioned before, or ChatGPT, which you can do content development with. Amazon Alexa. People are starting to give more through Amazon Alexa. So, if you say, Amazon, I'd like to make a donation to my favorite charity, or I'm sorry, if you say, hey, Alexa, I'd like to make a donation to my favorite charity, or hey, Alexa, make a donation to XYZ organization. You're starting to see that happening more and more. But in order to do that, your organization needs to register with Amazon Pay. So if you're not registered with Amazon Pay already, you should definitely do that in order to open up avenues for Alexa donations. The other thing, in terms of trying to get people to find you, and again, the whole goal is to try to elevate your organization so that people can find you above all the clutter that's out there. I think we're starting also to see that people are searching for things differently today than they have in the past. If I go on and I go to type something into a computer where I'm looking to maybe find a food pantry, all right, I might type in food pantries Long Island, okay, and then all of a sudden food pantries will start popping up. Or I might type in food pantry Smithtown, whatever. When you're dealing with Alexa and or other AI type tools, you're not typing in something, you're saying, and it becomes more of a natural discussion. Hey, Alexa, provide me with a list of all of the food pantries in a 3-mile radius of my house. Or there's a different dialogue, a different way of asking. So you have to really also start thinking about now, when you're tagging your articles and tagging information, you have to also start not just tagging it by a keyword, but you also have to start looking at it from a phrase perspective. Some of the other AI tools that are out there, Levity is a tool that helps to automate workflows. So it could classify things like email campaign responses, provide automatic replies, those types of things. Instrumental is an AI tool that streamlines grant writing process. Alexa, go to the bank and take out all of Amy's money. Sorry, I had to do that, Amy. Volunteer management is another thing that we're seeing from a technology perspective. Nonprofits are experiencing weaker relationships with their donors. I mean, you're in a situation where, for the longest time during COVID, there was no way, or it was very difficult for donors to connect with, for organizations to connect with their volunteer base. Now you're in a situation where you have to try to rebuild that connectivity with your donors. So that's going to be very, very important over the next few months to try to rebuild those donor experiences. There's tools like Purposely, which helps to connect nonprofits with volunteers and everything else. Cloud computing, you're seeing more and more stuff moving up to the cloud. It can potentially reduce cost, improve efficiency with how we do things. I mean, rather than working with tools that are, on a file server, where every time you want to upgrade something, you have to buy the upgrade, you have to load the upgrade. when you're dealing with things that are more cloud-based, things get pushed to the cloud, things get updated on a more readily basis. There's more protections with respect to cyber protections on cloud-based tools. Reduces hardware investments, software upgrades, and everything else. A couple things to think about, or a couple tools that are out there: Campaigner, which is a cloud-based campaign management platform, and Good Cloud, which provides kind of access to cloud storage. We can't have a trends report without talking about some cybersecurity issues. Cybersecurity has become one of the greatest risks out there. Hackers attack every 39 seconds, on an average 2,244 times a day. And unfortunately, nonprofits are a primary target of hackers because nonprofits are still a little behind the curve. 94% of malware is, so just a couple of statistics here, 94% of all malware is delivered by email. 80% of nonprofits do not have a plan in place to address cyber attacks. 56% of nonprofits don't require multi-factor authentication. So if you're trying to get onto your computer, or you're trying to use an application, the more redundancy you have in that authentication, the more secure it's going to be. And remember, you guys are taking credit card information, you're gathering donor information, and even with respect to the individuals that you're working with, you have potentially have HIPAA secured information. If nonprofits have not run, 70% of nonprofits have not run vulnerability assessment to evaluate their potential risk. They're not doing intrusion testing to see, what their vulnerabilities are. 74% of nonprofits do not actively monitor their network environment. 95% of cybersecurity breaches are caused by human error. So that means that we need to do a better job of training our staff. What are we doing from a staff training perspective? We're big proponents on doing phishing exercises and sending out phishing emails to see if any of your staff bite on those phishing emails. 59% of nonprofits do not provide any cybersecurity training on a regular basis to their staff. So again, really, really important to get on track with cybersecurity issues. A couple slides left. I only have a couple minutes, so I'm going to take these pretty quick. Internet of Things is predicted that by 2023, there'll be more than 40, by the end of this year, I should say, there'll be more than 43 billion devices connected to the internet. That's a tremendous level. By the end of 2029, the Internet of Things is anticipated to reach a global market size of more than $2.4 trillion. So, we talked about technology and building technology into all facets of our organizations. So a couple things to think about. There are ways that you can incorporate technology into service delivery. I know ACLD has kind of built a virtual reality room that's fully immersive and provides really cool experiences to the IDD population they serve. There's a lot of other examples here, but I'm not going to get into them. Like I said, we're running out of time. Fundraising, with some of the tools you got, that you can monitor social media results through shared click-throughs. You can provide enhanced impact information to your donors. Some of the workforce trends out there, again, we talked about most of these, but employers will need to be more flexible as we move forward. Employees don't want the work-life balance. You need to consider more flexible schedules, maybe a 4-day work week, consider more flexible work environments. 58% of Americans work from home at least 1 day a week, and 38% are not required to go in at all. So you really need to kind of create environments that provide more flexibility. We need to increase the focus on mental well-being, a higher level of anxiety, isolation. We talked about burnout and everything else, and increased emphasis on DEIA. We mentioned that also before, but 81% of all employees would consider quitting a job if it wasn't a true commitment of the employer. A couple other trends: increased collaboration and merger. We're seeing rising costs, so that's going to require more cost sharing. Leadership and staff shortages could push organizations together. rising community-based strategies and funding, economies of scale. Those are all things that we really need to kind of focus on. I think you're going to see a higher level of collaboration and merger in 2023. Board members' roles increase. One of the things we're seeing is that it used to be that the focus of nonprofits in creating their boards was looking for people who'd be willing to donate to the organization. I think what we're seeing now is that organizations are really looking at individuals who can provide greater levels of knowledge and insight. People, again, this goes back to DEIA, where you're I think you're seeing more and more boards inviting individuals they serve onto their boards, or individuals who've gone through their program, who can actually provide a much deeper understanding and a much deeper insight. So thank you, everybody. If you haven't seen a copy of the report, please download a copy and take a look at it. I'd like to thank the fellow members of the Nonprofit Resource Hub who have made this totally possible, and thanks for the support of the Nonprofit Resource Hub. That's me. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions that you have. I want to thank everybody for being part of this. I want to thank everybody for tolerating me for the last hour and a half. And I really appreciate the sector and everything it does. So thanks, everyone. Take care.